everybody, and welcome to the XR Sales Director Incubator. The program helps you be better prepared to have a career conversation and to make a great career decision. My name is Mike Dixon, and I run the sales and marketing practice for XR Recruitment and Search. And on this program, we introduce you to a group of leading sales directors who share learnings from their career journey, give advice on making career decisions, and share insights on what life is like as a sales director. Now, welcome to today's guest, Alexia Horley, Senior Sales Director of PepsiCo. Hi, Alex. How are you?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, great. Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here.
Fantastic to have you. Really looking forward to exploring your career, which didn't start out in sales, and we'll get into that. And you've spent time overseas in the UK and in Asia as well, so lots to explore, and can't wait to talk about it. Now, guys, for those of you who are new to this session, you're muted on terms of the call, but we'd love to hear from you. So there's a chat facility. Please jump on, ask questions as you want, and I'll keep an eye out and ask those of Lex, or if they're of me, that's fine. We'll get to them. But and for those who can't stay for the full 45 minutes, we'll be done in 45 minutes. If you've got to go, don't worry. You can listen to this session and all our previous sessions on the podcast, Your Future in Sales and Marketing, available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So jump on there. So let's get into it. Now, a couple of just icebreakers, warm-up questions, Lex, on you. I'm always interested to see when a salesperson is going around a supermarket, how they shop the supermarket. But what would we always find in your basket?
Great. I love this question, and being a loyal PepsiCo person, and it's actually not just because I'm a loyal PepsiCo person, but I cannot go past a pack of chicken twisties. So they are my absolute go-to. The other thing that you may find in there is as my sort of guilty pleasure is also a curly whirly. So really old school, yet nice tasty treat, but definitely from a PepsiCo point of view, chicken twisties.
Chicken twisties, yeah. Curly whirly. I didn't realize you can still get them.
You can still get curly whirlies, funnily enough. Yeah.
That is taking me back. I'll have a look at curly whirly. Great. Okay, bit left field. What would your second dream home be? Now, if you had a choice, luxury apartment in the city, beach house, tree house, mountain lodge, where would you go?
Oh, it's always the beach. So I think, growing up in Sydney and, fortunately living by the beach as I was growing up, it's always a place for me, both personally, just to sort of go to sleep, sort of where the lapping of the waves, but also just with the family. It's such a place that we can go and all enjoy. Kids can just run on the sand, and it's somewhere that's just a really great getaway for me. So definitely beach.
Favorite beach?
Oh, goodness. We had the pleasure to enjoy so many wonderful, wonderful beach holidays, living in Malaysia. But at the end of the day, nothing beats beaches here in Australia. We often get away up to the Central Coast to meet masters. So that's probably a bit of a go-to.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Cool. Now, I mentioned before you didn't start out your career in sales. You had a pretty successful career in finance. In fact, I was at the XR CFO Incubator yesterday morning, which is a live event. And the speaker was Steve Harrison.
Oh, wonderful! Yes,
CFO of Woolies.
Yes.
So I was at Steve's table, and he said to me, "Oh, I noticed you've got a sales director incubator, and you've got Alexia Horley on tomorrow." Said we used to work together in finance.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah. So when I joined PepsiCo, he was heading up commercial finance. So funnily enough, we had that experience of working together. But yes, Mike, as you said, my corporate career did start in finance. In fact, I actually joined a graduate program with Goodman Fielder as a rep. So it's actually gone full circle. So I did actually start out in the field as a rep with Goodman Fielder Field Operations, but quickly moved across to their food service division as a business analyst. So I moved sort of quickly into that finance space, and then spent the next 10 or so years working in finance. As you mentioned, I was in the UK working for Sainsbury's supermarkets in a number of retail finance roles, labour cost finance, transformation finance, and their sales finance team, and then returned to Australia and joined Campbell Arnott's and did a number of, I did supply chain finance and then some marketing finance work before joining PepsiCo. And so I joined PepsiCo as the finance manager for our franchise beverage business. Again, a really different business model many of you may or may not know, but the way that we operate in Australia is in our beverages business is through a partnership with Asahi Lifestyle Beverages. So we are essentially the brands and do anything that talks to the brand consumers, but essentially, we generate our revenue through the sale of our concentrate to our bottling partner. So I was working on the finance side there for our franchise, so a totally different model to operating businesses, and that was sort of where my career at PepsiCo started. So I spent a number of years there, but I think I've always known, and it's funny, I think it might have even been Steve Harrison that talked to me about, well, do you want to be a CFO? And I sort of very early on knew that I didn't want to be a CFO, right. Even though, again, the face of CFOs has changed significantly, in the past few years around the role that they play. But I had always seen that I, sort of was more interested in a general management path or in a commercial path, and had that conversation, with all of my managers, I suppose, in that space. So I was really fortunate then, after a number of years in the finance role in beverages at PepsiCo, that I had the opportunity to move across to the commercial role in our beverages team, which worked in partnership with our bottling partners, which was Asahi in Australia, so Schweppes in Australia, and Frucor in New Zealand. Actually, it was quite an opportune time, because it was when Cadbury's actually had owned Schweppes, and they'd sold Schweppes to Asahi, and similarly in that same year, Danone had sold Frucor to Suntory. So I had the great opportunity to work through the renewal of those bottling agreements, which was quite fascinating. And then I also supported our customer management on our big customers, such as our Yum business, so the Pizza Hut and KFC at the time. So that was really my start into the commercial space, and really fortunate to have that opportunity. And then I guess working at PepsiCo, having been in beverages for 6 or 7 years, the next opportunity was really to move into our snacks team, into our food side of business. So the Smith Snack Food Company, which was the foods arm of PepsiCo. And at the time, I didn't know, I didn't have a specifically targeted role or where I was going to go, but I knew that I wanted to come into the snacks commercial team. So really just started to build the relationships with the leaders in that team, let them know that I was there, let them know that I was interested, start to build my understanding, of what was going on, so that should a role come up, I was the one that they thought of, that they had me as top of mind, that got the opportunity to move across. And so it was then that I had the chance to move into our independence business manager role. So I was able to come into the snacks business, and I was leading our indies team. So looking after essentially anything that is not the Coles and Woolworths on the grocery side. So our lovely partners at Metcash and all the great MSOs. And at the time as well, the way that we went to market with that part of our business was direct to store. So we had a fully operating direct to store model with cash vans and delivery. So really, what I learned in that role was around how to work indirectly with our super capable field team, but really to make things happen in that environment, it was really around the influence that they had at the store level, as much as what we were doing from an account side. So, it was a relatively small state-based team, but at the same time, a relatively large indirect team that influenced the results.
And when you made the move into sales, and that's a pretty planned, well thought through transition from your perspective, were you encouraged by the business, or was there people kind of raising their eyebrows saying, that's an unusual step?
Not at all, actually, quite the reverse. So when I was in beverages, the person that was in the commercial role at the time, and I'd been thinking it, and I'd had those conversations with my boss, but he's like, oh, Lex, you should come into my role after me, I really think. And I wanted that as well. Yeah. So he really supported and I suppose mentored me into getting ready and building the capability, or sort of, getting the experiences that I needed in the finance space. So what meetings did I start to need to attend? What pieces of work could I pick up more actively, so that when he was sort of moving on, that I was the person that was thought of. So, I was really supported by the organization to make that cross-functional move. And I think, goodness, that was sort of over 10 years ago or so. So, really great that I was afforded that opportunity. And I think it's really more prevalent these days as well to sort of encourage those cross-functional moves to sort of build richness of experience for people, whether they are doing it from a more permanent move and stay, or whether they're doing it as a learning experience, moving and then going back to their function.
Do you think there's particular times in a career that cross-functional move is beneficial, or is it something that you should be open to at all stages?
I mean, I would say open at all stages. I think there are some junctures that it feels more natural to move across. I've heard sort of, people say the more senior they get, the tougher it is to move across. But I think it depends on the type of commercial role. I think if these days in sales, the roles are so diverse. So there's going to be roles that are going to be able to capitalize on different experiences. And so it might be a chance that you can move across. Perhaps if you've never done a commercial role before, you might not be able to move into something like a Woolworths or a Coles sales director role. But there are other roles across the business that are more, general management or more business focused, that those skills from other functions can come in and be really, really rich. In fact, the person that's leading our traditional trade team is also finance, and she's come across from the commercial finance manager role. So at a senior level on my SLT, and she was covering a maternity leave and doing a phenomenal job. Yeah. Having had a pure finance background up until now. So I think at any time, when you're, although I would encourage that it probably now, as we look at lots of different cross-functional moves, it does make sense to try and grab those broadening experiences early on, because I think there's more fluidity and also more roles available. So whether it be from category to commercial to sales, or vice versa, or even commercial finance analysts, you can go and have an experience as a account exec or some of those kind of things. So you can dabble and you can build the richness of that base and then work out sort of which direction it may want to take you. Yeah,
I think it's happening more, and there's probably more than a lot of people realize. I think often when I meet a candidate who's seeking advice about their career journey, they think in quite linear terms on the next obvious role in front of them or the role in front of that. And yet yesterday I was had a client meeting yesterday afternoon with somebody who's looking for a national account manager for Indies, and he's a finance guy. He's been running Indies and he's loving it.
Snap.
Yeah. So similar pathway. And so it definitely happens more. So I think that's great advice. Talking of advice, what's the best piece of career advice you've been given?
That's a great question. I think, we talked about the broadening experience. I think, definitely looking and exploring different things cross-functionally. Really, the pieces around building that base of critical experiences. So it's not so much about the next role after the next role and really chasing, as you said, that linear path. I think the more in your career that you can build a breadth of different things, and you can get those critical experiences through different roles. You can get them through projects, or you can get them just through different pieces of work that may come across your door in the role that you're in. So I'd say focus on gathering those critical experiences. And it's almost a bit of a go slow to go far, because I think once you've gathered that breadth of base, you're going to be so well positioned to accelerate your career in the future. And that's certainly what I saw in, sitting and gathering a number of different experiences, both internal strategy, whether it be revenue management, transformation, before I had the opportunity then to move into the more senior roles, such as our sales director at Woolworths, and then also the opportunity to go overseas. So definitely gather those critical experiences, but be really, really open. The other piece is be open and say yes, because the face of FMCG and the face of our organisations are changing so rapidly that the next role that you think you want either may not exist, or the next role that you will have may not have existed in the past. There are so many different parts of our organisation, whether it be the acceleration of digital and e-commerce and some of those spaces. So don't be so fixated on the next role. Think about the experiences that you want to build, and think about the directional spaces that you want to go to, and be really open and say yes.
How would you profile yourself in an organisation to ensure that the business knows that you're up for it, because a lot of people on the podcast or on today's live session are probably thinking, that's great, but how do I do that? Who do I talk to? Because some people may be thinking, well, my boss has got a vested interest in keeping me where I am because I'm doing well. So, and I don't want to talk to too many people because that might disrupt the relationship I have with my boss. So how do you kind of manage that message really well within the business?
So I think the first thing is, it's absolutely up to you as an individual. I think you own your career. Your manager and your organization will support you and will be, I guess, in partnership. But at the end of the day, it's up to you. So I don't think you should be scared of what your manager will think from building a network. I think there's such richness in, connecting with different people at different levels in the organization, just so they know who you are. Our organizations are big, and sometimes there might not be that direct exposure. And perhaps if you do have one of those type of managers who, really want to keep you in that box, if no one else knows what you want to do or where your interests are, or where you're seeking different experiences, then that perhaps hampers you if you're keeping all your eggs in that manager's basket to look after you. So, own it yourself, build that network, reach out. I mean, anyone who's sort of reached out to me to connect for a coffee, I'm always up for it. So I'm always keen to, whoever in the organization, wants to say, hey, really keen to have a catch up. I think good on them for sort of stepping up and owning it, and wanting to sort of have their profile, sort of a bit more realized. I think at the end of the day, though, it does come down to results. So you need to be delivering in the role. You can't just sort of, be coasting along and perhaps not doing too good a job, and the manager doesn't think very highly of you, but think that you're going to have this great. So, start with, delivering in your role and doing the best that you can in that space, but don't underestimate the power of building that breadth of network within the organization for the opportunities to come up. And my opportunity to move overseas would not have come up if that weren't the case. If I hadn't had the relationship already with the person who'd moved into the HR role in that Asian team and knew of me and knew me and had worked with me in the past, to sort of say, hey, Lex, are you keen? So it does go both ways. Yeah. Deliver in role, but build that network. Yeah. First one is important. I think too often, Absolutely.
You're trying to run too fast, but and that's okay. But ambition is a great thing. But make sure you focus on the moment and you're doing your job really well. But networking is super interesting because a lot of people see it as almost something that they're too busy to do, or it feels like an imposition on the people that you're targeting to be in your network. But the reality is, as you say, when someone reaches out, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be received warmly.
Yes, absolutely.
And you therefore, it's not something to shy away from. It's something to proactively spend time on. And the reality is too, it'll also make you better at your job, because you're going to talk about, you get different perspectives and experiences that you're going to layer back in and probably improve the performance of what you're doing anyway. So there's a short-term benefit as well as that long-term investment in your profile. So my advice to anybody who probably thinks they don't network enough is you've got to devote time to it and spend time and within your business, but then externally as well. There's no harm in actually targeting people in the industry you rate or you think are interesting and reach out, because we're a pretty social bunch and people like to give time back, because we've all done it as well. Yeah, great. Now, overseas is something that you've done a couple of times. Your career has not just been with Australia. Nothing wrong with spending a career in Australia, but it is quite a common thing amongst a lot of people I meet in the Sales Director Incubator that they have spent time overseas and they've gathered that experience. Is it, is it something you've got to do? For you, was it something you had to do? Was it more of a personal thing?
Firstly, I don't believe that it's something that you have to do to sort of get to the level that, as a sales director. So I don't think it's a prerequisite to the role, certainly not to sales director roles that are leading Australia, because I think the market is, having the knowledge of the local market is probably more important than the other experiences you get. For me, it was a combination. So it was really seeking both the personal and the professional experience to go overseas. Our children were at the right age and stage, and it just sort of it worked for us. But I felt that I would get a really rich experience in, culturally, but also professionally, in just different types of leadership. So I learned a heap. I was exposed to, again, really different business models, really different styles and ways of working. And so it really challenged me to sort of, think about how do I leverage the strengths of the style that I have, but also flex it appropriately enough so that it works in this environment. And I think that was really a great lesson that I had from that experience. Because it's funny though, people often in the industry sort of say, oh, actually, don't go overseas because then when you come back, you won't be able to move into a senior sales role. The market moves so fast. If you don't know the customers intimately, then you're never going to be successful in a senior role. And we're not going to take people from outside. And I think that, for me, coming back as a sales director, yes, I'd had 2.5 years out of the market, but I had an amazingly capable team, underneath me, already leading those business, knowing their customers intimately. So I just had to come back in and build my, re-understand, where the landscape had changed, where it hadn't. But I was really, really confident in the skills and the capability and the caliber of team. And that was one of the things from coming from Asia to come back to Australia. Wow, our people are amazing. So, that really meant that I just had to get back immersed in our business, understand the landscape, but I had people already running those customers. So I didn't feel that because I hadn't had that continuity of Australian experience that I was, not going to be able to be successful in the role.
Yeah. I think I often meet people coming back from overseas and sometimes extended overseas periods. And, they can be a challenge if you've been overseas for a long time, about coming back at the level you want to come back at.
Yes.
Particularly if you're not coming back within your organization. If you're deciding you're on the you've found yourself on a global treadmill almost, and you decided to get off that and come back home, it can be tougher. But I would encourage people to do it if the opportunity arises, because even if you have to come back to a slightly more junior role for a period, you've banked a lot of experience. It's going to pay off. And you'll accelerate back out quickly with that experience. And you just invest a bit of time getting to know the local market again, raising your profile. But equally, I'd also say when you're overseas, don't lose touch with your network.
Yes, that's really critical, actually. So stay connected. And whether you have that desire to come back in your organization, stay connected within your organization. Yeah. But stay connected to touch points that will, sort of enable that back to Australia, whether it be, recruitment partners or other industry peers. Absolutely really important just to have that sort of pulse check and know that you've then got options to explore on that return.
Yeah, and it means your profile is just there. It's there's this podcast, there's plenty of forums for you to kind of just, in a light touch way, maintain that network. So anyway, in summary, I think absolutely if the chance arises, do it.
Absolutely.
You're investing great experience for either when you come back immediately, but certainly down the line as a leader, for sure. Great. Now, one of the things I wanted to touch upon as well was L&D.
Yes.
And we talked just a second ago about you own your career, you own that pathway. But I think L&D for me often feels much the same. People expect the business to do that for them. What's your perspective about how you drive your own development?
So I think, as I said before, having that ownership of your own career, and then having, I guess, a robust development plan that you've sort of created, but then in partnership with your manager as well. So how do you make sure that you've actually got, and not a laundry list, but a tight set of, 3 or 4 objectives that are different to your performance-based objectives that sort of say, these are the things that I want to work on, get exposure to, or build my capability in, whether they be functional excellence or whether they be leadership capability areas. And I think, we're fortunate that we work in a large, large organization. So we do have access to a lot of content, probably too much. It's probably overwhelming in terms of the amount that's out there, whether it be through our portal, our global portal, so our PEP University, or, local L&D programs that the team are putting on. So I think then if you've got that development plan, then you're clear on the areas that you want to focus. And then I think it's about curating that solution with whether it's stuff that's available already through your organization, or if not, how do you then be more targeted about what you need to go out and seek? So it can otherwise, there's so many things on offer, and you can sort of run the risk of just doing a course for a course's sake. But I think from a learning and development, it's not just about courseware. I think the richness from a learning and development plan also links back to that concept, or the idea of around critical experiences. There's so much on the job learning that you can get in your current role, whether it be on just taking on a project. And there's so much of that stuff happening, whether it be systems upgrades or, building our, sort of digital footprint. So, information, data analytics and some of those things. There's so many different options of projects that if you've got the capacity in your role to take on, that might build that critical experience instead of any specific courseware. So I think it's a combination of on the job, learning, networking, mentoring, talking to people, and then a little bit of courseware. But if you don't have that structured plan in the first place, I think it's really difficult to target what you need to sort of build to address that.
Yeah, you'll just get confused by all the options.
Do everything, and you're kind of like, I'll do 3 courses because that's what I need to do every year. Well, are those 3 courses really the right 3 courses that really support your development in these 3 areas?
Yeah, completely. I want to also touch on mindset around career pathways. And I meet some people who seem incredibly confident about what that next step is and how ready they are for that step. But in your mind, do you need to be ready for, how ready do you need to feel to take a role? Is it about kind of mental preparedness, or do you need to take a leap, or what's your perspective?
I think this is a great question. And I know that on previous podcasts, there's been, female leaders that have sort of asked the same question. So I think it's a tough one. I think as a female, we always want to be 110% ready. For that next role, we always want to sort of say, have I got the full capability to be able to do that role in its entirety yesterday? There's a bit of reluctance, certainly personally, and I reflect on the time when I was being discussed about the Woolworths sales director role. And I didn't feel ready. I didn't feel like I could go in and do that role in, fully capably from day one. But I knew I had some great skills and some great experiences that I could bring to that role. But I was apprehensive. I was like, oh gosh, do you think I can do it? Really? You think I should go for this role? So there's a lot of that stuff going on. But unless you lean in and, as I said, go back to that advice around saying yes and backing yourself, because I think, you're never going to regret going in and having a chance. And if your organisation is backing you as well, then you know that you're going to have the support. You're going to have the support network behind you. So readiness is a state of mind, because I think don't underestimate the richness of the experience that you bring, not necessarily having done the specific tasks before or been in an equivalent role before.
Yeah, I think that's great. And every step should be a little bit uncomfortable, because that's the push.
Well, that's that challenge. If you're not challenged, you won't change.
Yeah.
So how do you make sure that you've got that blend of, I feel like I've got the skills to do this, yet I'm really going to throw myself in and be challenged and a bit uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Great question coming in the chat around good advice, Alex, on breadth and confidence to try new things. As a senior female leader in PepsiCo and within the industry, what are some of the challenges you've faced, and what is the legacy you want to leave? Great question. Great question.
Thank you. Putting me on the spot. So I think challenges faced. Goodness, I don't know if challenges faced, sort of, it's probably more experiences in the different roles and navigating through it. I think when I think about challenges faced, it's probably coming into the Woolworths sales director role, and we really weren't in a great space in terms of partnership with our customers and really having the right level of understanding of what makes a great customer partnership, but also bringing the team together as a cross-functional group of people. So whilst in that role, you know, there's only a few people that are your direct reports, which are the account-facing team, really you're leading a fully cross-functional group of people that are driving that agenda. So getting the organizational commitment behind the agenda that you're leading cross-functionally and having everyone feel that shared accountability for the commercial results. So not just having that for yourself, but also really looking to step change the way that we work with retailers. It's really important that we build partnerships with our retailers and understand their strategy and how our strategy can enable and support, you know, driving growth through our categories in partnership. So that would probably be certainly some of those challenges and similar challenges, I suppose, in this role today, just at a different level. In terms of a legacy to leave, you know, I think that's really around making sure that we've got the best and capable talent in my team, and great succession planning so that we can continue to operate as a successful team that we are. So, you know, I already have a strong female leadership representation on our SLT. So really making sure that we continue to champion that diversity, and have that you know, front and center, so that you know, we've got that right breadth of difference of thinking, but making sure that we're building that capability through the organization. When I think about the commercial agenda, you know, I would love for our organization under my leadership to be thought of, you know, as the business that's really, you know, step changed how we work in partnership with our retailers and our customers, so that we really are that preferred partner for the future. You know, as the way of business evolves, we look towards, as I said, spaces like e-commerce and more digital space. You know, we do need to operate differently. So how do we lead that transformation and partner with our retailers on that transformation, so that when they think of organizations that are really at the forefront of that, sort of from a future state vision, where the business is going and who's going to be the best people to, you know, capture those opportunities for growth, I would love that to be our business.
Great. And another interesting question come through actually on the chat. If you've only ever worked in sales roles, do you think this is detrimental to becoming a sales director, as you won't have the breadth of experience across other functions like finance or ops?
So again, the answer is no. So I think that you can still have a really rich and broad experience in sales. As I said, you know, the requirement for our sales teams to be significantly more commercially savvy these days. You know, they're living and breathing in P&Ls more so than ever before. So I really think that you can still build that finance capability in sales functions. Similarly, you know, whether it be that category knowledge as well. So I think you can still have a single stream. I don't think it's probably, I would say, seek opportunities that give you that breadth, even if you are housed in a commercial or a sales role. Yeah. But it's not, I don't think it's a deterrent, but seek the breadth regardless of I guess, the name of the role that you're sitting in.
Yeah. I think because breadth comes in lots of different ways.
That's right.
You know, and you know, I have conversations all the time with people in the sales function as a special sales recruiter who focus perhaps too much on, you know, grocery as the nirvana, the one thing they want to work on, and that's actually really narrowing. If you're going to stay in grocery, then it's important to know grocery, but it's important to understand other channels, whether that's you know, indies, or whether that's out of home, or whether that's you know, getting involved in export or international business. But then the whole role of sales is becoming more diverse, and you know, something we talked about beforehand, and with that in mind, actually, you can develop a range of skills by staying within the function, but working on all sorts of different things. With that, you know, thinking about that whole area of diversity, Alex, what do you think we could be doing as an industry to encourage more diverse talent into the sales function? Because I think there's still a perception externally of what sales is, which is different from the reality of where the profession's got to.
I agree. And sort of when you first sort of talked about that question around diversity, I actually immediately went to, diversity of the capability within the function before thinking sort of, other diversity, gender diversity and others. So when you think about the diversity of the function, as I mentioned, these days, our sales teams, they're so commercially savvy. It's, and that's a, sort of that's a seat at the table. You really need to have that understanding to be operating at a senior level in sales. Many sales roles are almost operating like a mini GM. So, you're connecting and you're, indirectly influencing, certainly from an internal point of view, many other functions, working cross-functionally to unlock outcomes. So unless you've got the capability to do that, you're not going to be successful as well. So the selling element or the partnership element is only really one facet of that total breadth of what sales offers. In terms of then what we can be doing as an industry, I think things like this are sort of, helping build the exposure of the difference, of what sales or sales directors, the shape of those roles. I think, I'm not quite sure actually what else as an industry we could be doing to sort of, I guess, change the face. It's probably more, sharing those experiences and then having organisations showcase that as they're looking to attract talent.
Yeah, I think the industry's probably come a long way. The open-mindedness to career paths probably exceeds the perception of many of those who are looking at their career and thinking, well, this is my path. And the reality is it's very different. So the whole point of this program is to challenge people in their thinking, to think that actually there's many more things you can do. You can move into, whilst you might have sales as your core function, you can spend time on secondment and projects in cross-functional groups, initiatives that give you exposure either in an embedded fashion or just working really closely with other people, other functions that are going to expand your horizons and perspective. And you're going to be able to bring that back to your core role and become better at that.
Absolutely.
So, and I think it's the people who put their hand up and work their network and actually volunteer for all those kind of things are the ones who are getting the exposure without having to necessarily go overseas for that. You can do all that here, but breadth comes in lots of different ways. But if you can build those little pockets of breadth as you go, then you're building a network and you're building your skill set, and you're more likely to get those more senior roles. Certainly as a recruiter, it's one of the things I look for is to say, what else do you know? What other perspective do you have on business? I understand technically you'll be good at managing this customer, but actually let's see it from a supply chain perspective. Let's look at it from a strategic or category point of view. You may not have been a category manager, but what do you know about category and how have you found that out? And I think every business is open-minded to giving the opportunity. You've got to ask in a way that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. What do they say these days? It's more of a career lattice than a career ladder. So how do you make sure that career spiderweb, so to speak, is working versus a direct linear path? Yeah,
look, I love that. We had jigsaw and quilt last year. We got big lattice this year. That's really good. Excellent. Now, something we've been asked by a lot of the people on the call, and we haven't got to it, but it's a really interesting one, is about salary. How and when to negotiate a salary increase, because it's something we don't talk about as a society much, yet it's actually something that is a bit of a skill, and there is a thing about being prepared and timing and tone and when and how. What would your advice be?
It's a great question. So I'm going to, I guess, talk about this, from both perspectives. So, personally, as an employee looking for, when did I feel, or when do I feel that may be the right time, but also from the perspective as a manager. Yeah. So I think, once again, I think the starting point is performance. I think if you're not delivering to the functional requirements or the requirements of your role, then that's probably not a good place to start. I've found that the best junctures to seek pay increase, and most often when you're changing roles. So whether it be, obviously there's a big opportunity when you're leaving an organization, but within an organization, when you're have that opportunity for promotion or for a role change, those are the windows where I think there's more flexibility for an organization to support an increase sort of, beyond what's in their structured box. So I think the first thing is, if you don't ask, you don't get. And I don't think anyone is ever going to think poorly or be dismissive of an individual if they're asking. So really, if you think that you're, undervalued in terms of what you're being remunerated on, then I think the first thing is don't be afraid to ask. But I think it's not just a scattergun approach. I think it's how do you make sure that benching against your peers and benching that the request is well founded, and then those junctures, whether it be at performance review windows or also when you're changing roles, that are those good opportunities to seek it. And I think that there's a bit of a trade-off. So I think, being in an organization for a long period of time, you probably are going to sit slightly under, because if you've moved through that business, you haven't had that opportunity where you've left an organization to have a step change in salary. And I think it's the trade-off, because salary is not the be all and end all. There are other factors, in your overall happiness in a role, or, enjoyment in your work. But don't be shy. Don't be afraid to ask. No one will think badly of you. But respect where those things perhaps for whatever reason can't be met, but it doesn't hurt to try. And as I said, changing roles, performance reviews are probably the best window to have those conversations, because then you can get that real-time feedback around the reasons why or why not that might not be possible at the time.
Yeah. Something I deal with a lot, in my role is the salary question. And actually, we've got a whole podcast on this separately, but on the Your Future in Sales and Marketing podcast, we talk about how and when to negotiate salary based on a Harvard Business Review white paper that came out, which was actually pretty poorly written, I thought, which is really unusual for them because they're normally great. Yeah. But we kind of debunk that report a bit, but give some great advice. But if I can sum up a couple of things in that from that podcast, part of it is timing for sure. But it's also perspective. I think salary is you've got to feel if I'm not paid at the right level, then it works both ways, because you as long as you're in the bracket for your role, that's great. Don't stress it. And because if you're overpaid, actually, it becomes very difficult then to make a move.
That's right.
So don't be hell bent on raising salary beyond where the role actually is. Make sure you're in the right space. The conversation has to be holistic. It has to be, if you're out, then why, and give perspective and data points and so forth. But if you feel the time is right to negotiate an increase, then talk about it in terms of actually what's why and what's in it for the business as much as for you. But but don't sit and just fester over it.
Yes.
And don't leave a business because of it.
Yes.
Give the business the opportunity to understand how you feel before you're kind of walking out the door saying, I'm underpaid by 10 grand. Well, actually, you might get that 10 grand by going somewhere else, but what are you foregoing in terms of career? Could you have actually got that back 10 times over by staying in a business and actually having a better career path? So think about it, in the long term as opposed to just in the moment as well. So, but the podcast covers lots of this, guys. So it's a really interesting topic. Now, I'm conscious we're getting towards 45 minutes. That's gone super fast.
It certainly has, Mike.
Guys, we will try and finish on time. So we'll sum up there. So much we got through, so much we didn't get to that we'd like to get to. But Lex, thank you so much for your time this morning. Fascinating career journey. Like everybody else's, it's different. It's not the path that everyone expects when you look at a sales director, and it never is. And that's the whole point. You get there in so many different ways. Be open to the opportunity. Put yourself out there. Say yes. And back yourself. Don't wait until you're 100% ready for it.
Absolutely.
I know that's particularly for a lot of females who feel they have to be 100% ready, but I think your advice is push yourself.
Absolutely.
Which is wonderful. Everybody, thanks for coming on. We'll see you all again on July 1st. We meet Chris Sadler, Sales Director of Inova Pharmaceuticals. It'd be great to get his perspective. As always, you're also all welcome on the Marketing Director Incubator. Our next session is on June 17th when we have Seb Brandt, Marketing Director of Ingham's. I mentioned a couple of times, but all the Sales and Marketing Director Incubator sessions are on the Your Future in Sales and Marketing podcast and Spotify, Apple Podcasts. There's also a few bonus episodes on there around things like career planning or negotiating salaries. We've got a few more coming up as well. So jump on, subscribe, like, rate, do all those good things. Lex, thanks again. That was awesome.
Thanks for having me, and thanks to everyone on the call. Hope that it was insightful and that you got something from the conversation.
Brilliant. Okay, everybody, on your Thursday, have a great day.